This all mean? I think is a cool little question, right? What does this all mean? For my entire life, I've asked a lot of questions. In fact, my mom loves to share the story about how my favorite word used to be why. Uh, Depending on what version of the story she wants to tell, it was either why or no. Uh, I really loved saying no as a kid, and I still enjoy it to this day. But the question I think that was so powerful for me being younger, and then regardless of how someone took it, continuing that curiosity as an adult, I think has really shaped the way I view the world and live my life and interact with others. Why do people do what they do? Or why do you do it that way? Or why can't you just do it my way? I really love asking the question why. For me, understanding why people do what they do has always been fascinating. That's why I've studied psychology. There's documentaries out there uh, that really do like real social experiments on human beings and why they move, why they make decisions, why they feel justified in that, why society has gotten to the point it has today, why someone may be so angry or why they might be sad. Why has always been such a fascinating question. And as I've gotten older and I've dug a little bit deeper into why that fascination exists for me, it's because I'm really just trying to understand me better. Really just trying to understand why I do things differently than others and why I also do things the same as others and why I might place some sort of judgment on whether or not that's good or bad or right or wrong or evil or angelic even. Why some people are more successful than others, or why am I not figuring it out, but they are. And over the years, I've done lots of personal growth. I've read lots of books. I've been to seminars. I've staffed seminars. I've held seminars. I've coached people one on one. I've led groups. I've done a lot of question digging. I've done a lot of holding context. I've done a lot of being in the context. I've done a lot of studying on my own of, human evolution, the potential movement, human potential movement, and really getting to the core of like why. And through this process, what I've learned is there's different questions to ask that help get to a similar place as why, because we can't always describe it. Sometimes why we do what we do is so intertwined with how we've been that explaining it usually doesn't make sense. I'll never forget. I this was remember Dave Meltzer. If you guys don't know who that is, he's a genius businessman, marketing guy. I have the pleasure of meeting him many years ago. I wrote a couple articles for him for I think Inc. magazine, and I think a few went into Forbes and Success magazine and stuff like that. He was sharing this story. He kind of chuckled when he shared it, and I chuckle even now sharing it because for me it rings true, and I've been asked. But what he was sharing was someone had asked him a question. And this question was, "Hey Dave, how do I become a successful entrepreneur like you?" And he started out with, "Well, you go to school to become a lawyer." And he explained this journey of how he went to school to be a lawyer and then didn't want to do that anymore and then did this other thing and then did real estate and then went bankrupt and then had to sell watches and then just like told this like such a strange story. And truthfully that's why are you who you are today? And it's because of all of the past events that have occurred. Why, for me, I run an email marketing agency at the time I'm recording this video. And why do I do that? I get asked that question all the time. And it's like, well, I started out in school not wanting to really be in school. I didn't really like it. I'd pass my tests, would never do my homework. was smart. I just didn't seem to have a drive for it. And so I had to find another way. And so I still wanted to make money, be successful, and all that fun stuff. And so sales was my answer, right? You don't need a college degree. You don't need any training. A lot of times you can just go get a commission only sales job and they'll just see if you'll figure it out. And so that's kind of what I did. And I started, at a pizza place. And then I worked in a steel foundry as a metallurgical lab coordinator. And then I went on to sell auto parts and then tires and then cars and then became a sales manager and then realized I didn't want to do all that stuff. So I started trying all these other businesses and I made vinyl stickers. And you can kind of see that the path is quite messy. And so the reason I share this is because there's a question that I don't think is being asked of ourselves that would get us closer to living our full potential, to living ultimately the life of our dreams. And that question really is, what does success look like if you're not rushing towards it? And depending on where you're at in your journey, that question will mean two different things. For those of you that have yet to get started, what does success look like if you're not rushing towards it? Well, it doesn't exist, most likely. And then for those of us that have been rushing towards success for a very long time, have we stopped to consider maybe we've reached it, but we keep moving that goalpost? Aaron, for those of us that have stopped moving the goalpost because we're tired of chasing after the goalpost that we can never catch, what does it look like if we slow down? Could success be in the slow moments? And so I don't know where you are in your journey right now. I'm in an interesting place where rushing towards things may be the answer that I'm looking for, and enjoying the moment and finding success through pace rather than sprints. What does that look like? I don't know. And that's kind of the journey that I'm on. That's what I'm kind of going through. That's what I'm working through. And so that's a question that we can all sit on. What does success look like if you're not rushing toward it? What I originally thought, because I'm, just for a little bit of context, maybe you can relate. And my hope is that through sharing this, that maybe just one person is in this spot and this just helps light something up for you, or maybe one of you reach out to me on social media, or you text me because you know me. And maybe you guys got some great insight on this one, but what does success look like if you're not rushing towards it? Old me says it doesn't exist. Old me says you can't have success if you're not willing to run towards it. Old me says you can't have success if you're not rushing, if you're not moving with urgency, if you're not moving quickly. If you're not trying a million things, you're not going to find success. Old me would really believe that, because old me, before I was successful, the gap between being very average, making $8 an hour, and making $100,000 a year, was just running face first into every wall I could to make more money. And that worked. That worked for me for years. I was able to make six figures a year every year from the moment I turned 19 until I have yet to make less than six figures a year, to be honest with you. And that's just the reality of it. It didn't start that way. I started off by not working that hard, and I made $8 an hour, and then eventually I made $11 an hour at the steel foundry for 12 months. I got unlimited overtime. I worked 20 hours a day, got time and a half after 8 hours on a shift. You got double time after 40 hours. You can do the math. I was making, $1,500 to $2,000 a week as a high schooler. It was really amazing. And then that job got taken from me. And I couldn't sustain it. And then I had to find a commission sales job and figure out how to make six figures. And here's what I'm saying about this is that hustling works. And I think it works for a lot of people. And I think hustle is always necessary on the path. It's what I think the better question becomes, what does hustle look like on the path? Running towards things that are, you know, what you think you should be doing or what you think is a great business idea or whatever it may be. Like maybe. But I think the word rushing towards something and running towards something and sprinting towards something, I think a different word can be kind of placed in there. And as I'm talking through this, I'm really having a conversation with myself. But again, I'm hoping that this lands for you guys. And I think replacing rushing with moving intentionally, right? What does success look like if I'm moving intentionally towards something? Moving with intention is much different than running. Moving with intention is much different than rushing or sprinting or charging at or hustling towards. I think moving with intention is clear. There's been many times in my life where intention is important. I learned this at baseball, which we talked about earlier in this episode. We were taught that if you're on the field, you moved with intent. You ran. You moved with intention. You had somewhere to be, and you did it. And so, from the foul line on the third base side, all the way to the foul line on the first base side, right? So you had the field there. If you stepped over that line into the field, you ran. You moved with intention. You had a position to fill. You had a job to do. You had time to do it, and you made it happen. Did not matter how tired you were. Did not matter how many games we played that day. Did not matter if you slept the night before. Did not matter if you were injured. That's what we did since we were kids. We moved with intention. We were on the field. We moved with intention. Off the field, we were still intentional, but we didn't have to. We weren't sprinting, right? Because the intention was no longer to get where I need to be, so that way I have the most amount of time to do what I need to do. It then became, all right, now focus. Now, what could you improve? What works in this moment? How could you empower someone else to do great? How can you pick up something that's happening as a pattern to recognize on the field? And so the intention shifted. And so I think through moving intentionally in success, I think that could possibly be the difference maker. Instead of running away from things, you move intentionally towards something else. So what does success look like if you're not rushing toward it? That's a fascinating question that I don't have an answer to. I have an opinion about. I just shared it. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. That's a great question. I think as moving with intention, I think, some of the questions that I'm looking at is, why would slowness in a business be a superpower and not a liability? Can you build something beautiful without playing the volume game, right? And the volume of what? Interpret it however you like. The volume of work, the volume of ideas, the volume of whatever it may be. I think it's the subtle power of not reacting. Instead of reacting, be proactive, be intentional, move with purpose. I think the reason that I'm struggling with this so much, and I think others do as well through conversations that I've had at least, is that there's this like societal kind of norm, and we see it. The world rewards speed. I hear it. Bezos says it. Elon Musk says it. Most successful entrepreneurs say it, right? Speed is necessary in business. And I get that. I do. But I think what is possibly missing from the equation is the depth. I don't think Elon Musk is speeding towards things that his team or himself have not considered deeply. I think Bezos's teams, they're not moving fast towards things that haven't been thought about with depth. These other successful entrepreneurs, they're not, I don't believe they're moving at lightning speed towards things they haven't thought about with depth. I think the world rewards speed. Ultimately, we see it in social media, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, right? Speed to implementation, speed to trends. Who could be the first one? Right now AI is incredibly hot. If you're talking about AI right now, you're winning if you're the first person in your marketplace to release something using AI that replaces whatever. You're gonna win short term. And I think what people are starting to crave more than anything, and it's a slow momentum building, it's a slow process, and you're probably not going to see this turn for a couple of years. But I think the world is actually craving depth, and they're using speed and technology to avoid it, myself included. And I think through this process, a lot of us, and I'm having this conversation with myself, but again, I think this may resonate for some of you, but there's this invisible burnout I feel in just always being on in our culture. Performing versus living is something that I don't think anyone talks about. What is the point of working incredibly hard if at the end of the day we never end up having what we want? A couple of months ago, I was coaching 4 individuals do high performance coaching for high performers. I help high performers get unstuck, get more clear, find more purpose. Um, Throughout this process, I've learned a lot about myself and how to get me to perform better and how to get me unstuck and how to get me more clear. Throughout that process, I remember in the very first calls with all of them, it was almost the same thing. There's the story of the fisherman, Mexican fisherman, and the businessman. And you can look up the story if you want word for word. I don't know, I doubt it's a real story. It's more of a story to share kind of a point. And so the story goes, a businessman's on vacation. He shows up in Mexico, uh, near the water. He's down by the docks, and the Mexican fisherman comes in with a pretty awesome haul of fish. The businessman says, "Hey, have you ever thought about turning this into a business?" And the Mexican fisherman goes, "Why would I do that?" And the guy says, "Well, because you could make a lot of money." He's like, "Well, then what?" And he's like, "Well, then you could buy some more boats, hire some people, you'd have this big operation." It's like, "Okay, and then what?" And then the guy's like, "Well, I guess then you would have to go international. So you'd have to move to, China and Korea and Japan, probably somewhere in Europe, and run, build your operations up there, hire all the people out, all the talent, everything else. Should only take you maybe 5 to 10 years." Uh, and the guy's like, "Okay, then what?" He's like, "Well, then you could probably sell it for a large sum of money and retire." He's like, "Okay, then what would I do?" He's like, "Well, then I guess you could, hang out with your wife and fish every day and drink with your buddies until the sun comes up." And the fisherman says, "Well, that's what I do today." He's already doing all those things. He's already spending all of the time with his wife. He's already waking up uh, and doing what he wants to do every single day. He's already hanging out with his buddies and drinking until the sun goes up. He's playing his guitar and enjoying his life. And so I think a lot of times, and I think a lot of people take that story. I want to be very clear. I think a lot of people take that story as uh, I should be grateful for and love the life I have now. I don't need more. I think it means that a lot of us, me included, is that instead of just living the life that we want to live, right? We move this goalpost and make it incredibly complicated. If at the end of the day your goal is to spend time with your wife and children, or your spouse and your children, um, and to hang out every day and have an easy life like that, you don't need an incredibly lot of money, like a lot of money for that. You can probably, if you're making six figures now, you can probably build that kind of a life in the next 5 to 6 years, right? You don't need a big business. You don't need to make more than that. It's entirely possible for you, right? For those of us that make more, it's even faster, right? And then the question becomes, well, what becomes the purpose, right? What becomes the purpose of our life? And that I think is an incredibly important question because for what I've noticed in entrepreneurs, CEOs, whatever it may be, is we get so lost in like, I have to create this massive thing in order to live the life I want to live. And it's just not true, right? Unless, this is the caveat here, unless the life you want to live is that large, meaning, you want to truly change the lives of millions of people in a certain way, right? Then it makes sense. Then you need to build the thing as large as you're going to build it. But if you only want to build the thing up to help millions of people so you can have hundreds of millions of dollars, the reality is you only want hundreds of millions of dollars, and then you don't actually want that money. You want the life you think it's going to give you. And so that, I think, is where we're starting to get clear on that could be substantially beneficial for anybody. And so this is what I started with them, and I did it myself, is, if I had $1 billion in my bank account that I could spend any way I wanted to, and I would be guaranteed it would never be taxed, stolen, embezzled, none of that stuff. It'd be mine forever. What would I do then? And that was an incredibly hard exercise because I didn't have a good answer for that. I think most of us everyone came up with the same kind of answer at the end of that. I would sleep in all day, wake up on a beach, have houses all over the world and travel by private jet or a private island, all these fun things, right? And so then what do you do once you get bored is the question. And most people would say, I never get bored. And that's, more power to you. But if you're a high achiever, you're an overachiever, you're a high performer, you have a type A personality for the most part, unwinding and living a slow life is incredibly challenging for us. It just is. Is it possible? Yes. Is it realistic? Probably not. Right? You still want to feel useful. You want to feel important. You want to feel powerful. You want to feel empowered, all those fun stuff. So really get clear about that. I did. And I'm still working on that. What would I do? And for me, at the end of the day, I think it's teaching, it's sharing what I've learned, it's asking questions, it's being asked questions, it's living life, it's being challenged and being okay with that. So, what was the purpose of this? Well, purpose of this was for me to get an episode out there. It doesn't have to be pretty, it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be polished. I think through sharing my thoughts on these things here, I think it opens up dialogue. I think it opens up questions in your mind and in mine. And the goal for it is really for it to just be there and for it to exist, to get some of the thoughts, some of the ideas, some of the opinions, some of the stories, get them out of my head and get them out into the world, express myself, question myself. And the hope is that it helps at least one person listening to this. And maybe that person is you. So if you made it this far, thank you for being here. If you've enjoyed this so far, reach out, let me know. And I look forward to doing many more of these. And I look forward to having conversations with you, with myself, and with the universe. See what comes out of it. Thank you.